a since-demolished eatery on Belfast's Dublin Road. Its name boards an innocuous reminder of a visit by two of the 20th century's greatest entertainers, Stan and Ollie. In the 1950s, while variety was still in vogue, slapstick film stars Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy took their comedy show on the road across the UK and Ireland, a last hurrah coinciding with the release of their final film Atoll K, which had itself been made in Europe. They arrived in Ireland on the 25th of May 1952 with a 2-week stint at Dublin's Olympia Theatre. The show then moved north, with Laurel and Hardy spending a fortnight in Belfast, basing themselves in room 113 on the second floor of the Midland Hotel, adjacent to the busy York Street train station. Their visit would become something of a legend. While in North Belfast, the pair are reputed to have snuck out and visited local character Buck Alec, taken a trip to the Tonic Cinema in Bangor to judge a singing competition, and Stan celebrated his 62nd birthday. But all was not well. Both men were now in their 60s, and the ill health that plagued the pair in recent years caught up with them again. Stan spent at least part of the trip being cared for by the staff of Belfast's Musgrave Hospital, downplaying the severity of the situation. The 1952 act, A Spot of Trouble, was an adaptation of their 1930 short film Night Owls, and offered Northern Irish audiences their first chance to see the legendary performers in person twice nightly in the opulent setting of the Grand Opera House.
I have managed to find one little story about Stan and Ollie's first night here in Belfast. Now, according to the story, Stan and Ollie arrive at the Opera House by taxi. Stan walks on in, and Oliver follows suit. A much larger man, he takes his time. And as he's arriving at the door of the Opera House, there's a gentleman outside called Charlie Donaghy. And Charlie, who was an upholsterer by trade, was also known for his beautiful singing voice and his busking ability. And Charlie's outside performing the beautiful song St. Teresa of the Roses. And Oliver stops, and he listens to Charlie. And at the end of the performance, he bends down and gives him half a crown. And there, one of the great entertainers of the 20th century has been entertained by this humble man from Belfast. And in turn, he walks on into the doors of the Opera House and up these steps and on to perform before the Belfast crowds for the first time.
Few comedians have sustained their popularity for so many years in the same degree as Laurel and Hardy, and the universality of their appeal was never better demonstrated than by last night's audience. Children and grandparents alike cheered to the echo when the two figures, familiar to generations of filmgoers, made their appearance to their well-known signature tune. Although their style of humour has changed little through the years, and most of the gags had been long familiar, Laurel's air of concentrated stupidity and Hardy's superior knowledge are as irresistible as ever. The spot of trouble in which they find themselves this week is a real vintage piece. Setting off to break into the house of the Chief of Police, the two companions become involved in a series of difficulties such as no other burglars have ever experienced, and as usual, the whole venue ends in chaos. With a superb artistry which involves such technicalities as perfect timing and a supremely clever use of a minimum of words, these two old favourites can keep an audience of all ages in fits of laughter in a manner which must be the envy of many younger comedians.
There you go, it gives you a bit of a feel for what the show must have been like to audiences at the time. These were men by this stage in their 50s and 60s, they were getting on, but nevertheless Belfast loved them, and Laurel and Hardy themselves loved Belfast. The Laurel and Hardy live in person show proved so popular that the guys decided to return to the UK and Ireland for one last tour the following year. Now, originally this was meant to start in Dublin, move on to Belfast before hitting the rest of the UK, but unfortunately Oliver had visa problems, and so the show spent 4 weeks in Dublin rehearsing, and despite initial talk about it, they never made it to Belfast that last time. On the 11th of October 1953, the boys gave their final ever Irish performance, where they performed on behalf of the Little Willie Polio Fund. And the show was well received. They moved on to Northampton and the rest of the UK on the 13th of October. Now, their time here in Ireland was hugely important to both of them. The warmth and the affection and the sheer openness of the reaction of the public to them was something that they never forgot. Stan talked about it in his correspondence, and it's a comment he made that I want to kind of finish this piece on. So, remembering his arrival in Cove in County Cork on the 9th of September 1953, he said the following: "The docks were swarming with many hundreds of people. It was a strange thing our popularity has lasted so long. Our last good pictures were made in the 1930s, and you think people would forget, but they don't. The love and affection we found that day at Cove was simply unbelievable. There were hundreds of boats blowing whistles and mobs of people screaming on the docks. We just couldn't understand what it was all about. And then something happened that I can never forget. All the church bells in Cove started ringing out our theme song. And Babe looked at me and we cried. Maybe people loved us and our pictures because we put so much love in them. I don't know. I'll never forget that day. Never. And just as much as Stan and Ollie never forgot their time here in Ireland and that special day in County Cork, Belfast will never forget them and their visit here and the warmth and affection of those two great comedians.